Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Who Moved My Career, the podcast where we talk about career pivots that aren't just a possibility, they may actually be the point. Today's guest is Madeline Fetterly, a personal brand strategist, communication expert, and founder of Be the Brand Collective. Madeline works at the intersection of confidence, clarity, and communication, especially for professionals who want to lead boldly and show up powerfully in today's world. From professional branding to bespoke LinkedIn management and strategy, she helps people own their own story and use it well. Let's dig in. Welcome, Madeline.
Thank you, Nicole. So happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, we're so excited. This is a topic that I don't think we cover enough about. If you have ever listened to episode 1, Arun and I used to refer to LinkedIn as the digital sewer, which, we still might believe sometimes, but I do think that owning your narrative online, especially right now, is incredibly important. So I'm super excited to get into it today with you. Thank you so much for joining. So let's talk a little bit about what brought you to this moment. How did you start Be the Brand Collective? And what are you trying to hope with your business?
So for me, the hope for the business and for the point of what we do, it really is just about making sure that people who are doing the work, showing up day over day, year over year, decade over decade, are thinking thoughtfully about how they can continue to get credit for their work, how they can continue to have influence, raise their visibility, raise their credibility. So for me, so much of it is I just see so many amazing professionals who are very thoughtful, who do really good work, not really hone or understand their power. And so by thinking thoughtfully about your professional brand, how you're showing up, owning your narrative, you're really getting in the driver's seat of your professional power. And so for me, that's really what it's about, just making sure that more and more amazing people understand the power that they have within themselves and use it and utilize it in the public space, i.e. LinkedIn. I started the business like 6.5 years ago. I knew some amazing professionals through my nonprofit board. I was at an amazing nonprofit called Vital Voices, and I worked directly with their board quite a bit. And I met so many amazing people. And I would meet them and get to know them and hear their stories. And then I would want to continue their stories and share that with my mom or my sister or my neighbor, and just realize they had almost no digital footprint. Mm-hmm. And I thought, gosh, that's such a shame. They're really not thinking thoughtfully about how they're showing up online and how that could be a real force multiplier for the work that they do. And so that's where the initial idea came from. Of course, it's a business, so it's always changing and evolving over time. But we really kind of stay true to our origin story, in that it's about partnering with people, helping people understand their voice, coming in as strategic partners, and making people really as successful as they can be.
I love that concept of owning your power as opposed to something about self-promotion, because I think those two things get conflated really unfairly. And it was funny, I was talking to someone on my team this morning, and they were posting one of their first, pieces of thought leadership on LinkedIn, and they were hysterical about it. They were filled with feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome, and does anybody care what I have to say? And so there's the reframe of owning your power versus and kind of self-awareness versus self-promotion is, I think, really important to go through. Can you help us unpack the difference between self-awareness and self-promotion a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, that really is, a lot of times I feel like an armchair psychologist doing this work because almost everybody who works with us comes to us with imposter syndrome, for sure. And nobody who comes to us comes and is like, I see my friends bragging on LinkedIn, and so I want to start bragging on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Nobody says that. Everybody says, I see my colleagues and my peers utilizing LinkedIn. I feel very uncomfortable utilizing LinkedIn and talking about my professional life, but I know that it's important. And so I want you guys to help me strategize about what are the best ways to do that. So a couple of the things that we think about and talk through is, one, telling is not the same as bragging. So if you receive an award or your team does something amazing or you publish a report, just saying, I was so delighted to be part of this project. I really believe it, is going to matter for its constituents, or it's going to make a big impact, and cheerleading the other people who helped work on it. You're just saying what you've been up to professionally, And so really adopting that mindset of if we can think thoughtfully about how do I just say, here are the things that I've been doing, here's my expertise, here are the things that I care about, it can really help us get past some of that hesitation we have where we feel like we're bragging. So that's one thing we work through a lot. The other thing we talk to people a lot is what your colleague was experiencing this morning, which was, does this matter to anybody? Like, does anybody care? And my advice for that is to just flip it on its head and say, does it matter to you? Do you care? And to really think about your LinkedIn as a professional portfolio for your professional career. And so if you every, month, once a month, twice a month, write something on LinkedIn that you're proud of, that matters to you, that you feel like you have something to say about, a point of view, over time, that really builds into this wonderful professional portfolio that, of course, is public, but you're in control of it. And there's nothing else out there that exists like that. Like we might keep private Google Docs or have resumes or, whatever, but LinkedIn is an opportunity to like publicly make people aware of your value and your work. And it grows and grows and grows over time. The more that you invest in it. And so I would ask yourself, like, this, even if this doesn't matter to anybody else, like, does this matter to me? Does this matter to my professional narrative? And if so, yeah, I think that's well worth spending some time and doing something on LinkedIn for it.
So what does good look like in 2025 on LinkedIn? Is it still just about bios and thought leadership, or has something kind of fundamentally changed in the platform? I mean, its growth is unbelievable over the
Mhm.
past decade or so.
LinkedIn's had, multiple iterations. 7, 8 years ago, it was really just a static online resume. Nobody was really posting or using it for thought leadership. I really think in the pandemic is really when it changed.
Mm.
People were at home. Some people had more time. There was also a rise in like virtual events, which when you do a virtual event, that's a great opportunity to post, and say, basically there were almost like a rise and a democratizing of thought leadership opportunities. And so that's when I really feel like LinkedIn transformed away from being a static resume to being a thought leadership platform. How you guys call it, the sewer, which I think is very funny. And a lot of people feel that way. I also feel like when people talk to me, they feel like they're going to church, like they're very nervous. They're like, I know I need to do it, but I don't do it. Like people get very nervous when they come to talk to us.
We're going to the Fetterly confession box.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like everybody always confesses to me first. And I'm like, that's fine. Like I get it. So instead of calling it a sewer, I consider it to be like the public square of the day. It's like Athens. It's like that's where everybody is going to share their ideas, to have an exchange of thought. Some people maybe just feel like are like shouting in the corner. Some people are hosting and holding large forums, but it really is the public square of the day where people can go to share their ideas. And I think why professionals like LinkedIn so much is because LinkedIn itself continues to invest in the security of the platform. And so like you don't see a lot of like hate language. You don't see a lot of conspiracy theory. You
Mm.
don't see a lot of things that, are much more prevalent on other platforms. And so I think people feel safe, and I feel like they feel like they can be on it. Even if there are things that perhaps feel annoying to them about the platform, it still feels like this is an okay place for me to be because there's at least this level of decorum here. So I think, and even in the last couple of years, we see more and more executives leaning into LinkedIn. We see more and more like corporate budgets include LinkedIn for their talent,
Mhm.
not just for their brand. And that's because we know that messages that are put out by individuals are like 80% more effective than messages that are put out by company handles. And so it's the smartest strategy for like the CEO of a company to have a voice on LinkedIn and to be posting and to feel authentic, while also, of course, having a company handle, but not neglecting like those key talents, those key mouthpieces for your organization.
What do you say to people who, along the lines of having a CEO post about it, who say, but I am not a CEO and I am not working at a big company. It is just me. And it feels already so crowded out there with, the CEO of, you name it, Sam Altman, or you name kind of your like CEO of the moment, that I'm worried it's just going to be noise. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say you need to start by establishing like what are your goals for your LinkedIn usage? Like the goal of, of Sam Altman is going to be much different than your goal as a small business owner. And so I would say to really think about, okay, I believe, LinkedIn has like a billion users. So if you have access to a billion eyeballs, what do you want these people, like what do you want to get out of it basically? Like are you selling something? Are you trying to drive people to your website? Are you hanging your own shingle? Maybe you're leaving a corporate career and you're hanging your own shingle and you're ready to let people know, like, here's what I'm up to. Here are the ways you can engage with me and my team. Like, let's have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Are you wanting to be more established as a thought leader or an industry expert? Talking about those things. Or are you just working to amplify and elevate things that you care about? A lot of people talk about their like volunteer work or their nonprofit boards, those types of things. You can also really use the platform just to like cheerlead others. Lots of people will use it to like shout out their team or comment on former colleagues and their content. So I think the most important thing is to first identify everybody's going to come to it, or everybody should come to it with a different motive and a different goal, and be thinking really strategically about what are you trying to get out of this? Like, what do I want my message for the 1 billion eyeballs I have access to on LinkedIn to know? Start there and then remind yourself along the way that one, if you don't talk about it, nobody's going to know about it. Two, like the biggest indicator, I read this Harvard report recently that said the biggest indicator of whether or not people get promoted or not is whether or not their work and their value is known. Not whether or not you do good work, but whether or not people know about it. And so really thinking about is like, how do I want to be known? And how can I use LinkedIn to help me with?
I remember for many, many years in my own personal career, I didn't really pay attention to LinkedIn. I
Mm-hmm.
think I had the companies I worked at, I think I had the schools that I had gone to, maybe someone tagged me once a year, but I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't think about it as part of my career toolbox, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you what would you tell me in the Fetterly confession box if I said to you, gosh, I haven't done this in, ever, or maybe certainly not in the past 10 years or so. Am I starting at a detriment? How am I possibly ever going to find time for it? How do you talk about it with folks in terms of their career narrative?
I mean, I would say you're in good company. Like I said, nobody was using LinkedIn 5 years ago in the way that it's being used now. Then we saw like the early adopters to it. I would say maybe in the last 2 years, it's like the everyday professional, is like really leaning in and using it. So I would say, yeah, I would say you're in good company. And I would say just start. Just think about where you are now, establish those goals to drive business development, or I want to drive views to my podcast, or I want to be known as an industry leader in XYZ area, and just plot those three ideas out. Write out a couple of, ideas around things you could post about, and just try to, start building that presence. So if you're starting at zero and you haven't been utilizing, honestly, I would just say, okay, today's a great day to start, basically.
Mhm. Mhm.
I would say, in terms of like best practices, if you're like just getting started, posting 1 to 2 times a week is the max. If you're posting high quality content, like twice a month is fine. I would think about, again, prioritizing like high quality visuals. So try to use photos, try to use something that really is an engaging visual. LinkedIn is still just social media at the end of the day. And then I would say to not get too like worried about like, oh, I did this amazing thing 10 years ago and I missed out because I didn't get to post it on LinkedIn. No, that's fine. I would say just like, this is where you're starting and we're moving forward from here.
Mhm. I've heard a lot recently about the power of comments.
Mm-hmm.
So, I right now I'm spending a lot of time, as undoubtedly you are as well, being from the DC area or living in the DC area. You're not from this area, but there's a lot of people in the federal government who didn't even have a LinkedIn profile, let alone have spent a lot of time thinking through what they're doing. And one of the things I've been saying is start by looking at some people who you're interested in, other companies that you're interested in, find some people who follow those things, and then starting to comment. It's a little bit of the like dipping your toe in the water if you're not quite ready. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the idea of commenting is starting to shift a little bit in terms of the algorithm. Am I making that up, or is that accurate?
No, that's definitely accurate. I mean, if you're wanting to raise your profile and raise your presence, commenting and engaging on other people's content is a really smart strategy. So, LinkedIn, the algorithm itself is definitely, like you said, prioritizing and rewarding content, like, I'm sorry, commenting and that type of engagement on the platform. So it's almost like think about it as like if you're job hunting, you're going to a networking event and you like know exactly who you want to reach out to, but you like casually bump into them, at the bar, even though in your mind it's very strategic. That's like what I mean, that's like the digital version of what LinkedIn can do.
Yeah.
And so thinking about like, here are the jobs I'm interested in, here are the companies I'm interested in, who are their people, what are they doing on LinkedIn, how can I get my name in front of them, and incorporating that as part of your job hunting strategy. Yeah, is really smart. And then if you have a presence and you're trying to grow your presence, like grow your follower growth, etc., making sure that you're incorporating time to engage on the platform. That's why I say if you post once a week and it's high quality, that's great. I would spend the other days of the week, if you have 5 minutes, not just scrolling on LinkedIn, but like engaging on LinkedIn, liking, commenting, interacting with other people's content, and that will help your name out there almost as much as posting organic content.
It's
So,
funny. Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Good.
no, go.
Well, I was just gonna say, you mentioned scrolling, and that's where we got the digital sewer, because there's a lot of people who we likened LinkedIn at one point to, if you've just been laid off, or if you're in career limbo that is not by your choice, for instance, and you start scrolling on LinkedIn, it's not dissimilar to the kind of negative effects that a TikTok would have on a teenager.
Mhm,
Shame, despair, concern, worry. Those feelings come up, I think, when you scroll without a point, without a purpose,
mhm,
and you're doom scrolling. Doom scrolling on LinkedIn is a dark, dark place, because it's 1 o'clock in the morning,
mhm,
everyone's asleep, and you're seeing all of these posts, and it can feel very intimidating, I think, for a lot of people,
mhm,
when you intimidating and sometimes frustrating, when you right when you see people who announce a new job and you're thinking to yourself, I know you, and you couldn't, find a
mhm,
strategy with a map and a flashlight. What do you mean? Right. And so I think it can have a diminishing effect if you don't go into it with the right mindset.
mhm. Totally. I mean, I think like I always talk about LinkedIn as an exercise in emotional intelligence.
Mm.
One, in terms of how you post and like what you say. Like if you're worried something's going to feel tone deaf or maybe is too self promotional, like that's an opportunity for your own emotional intelligence to come into play. So ask a colleague, ask a friend, ask a mentor, like, hey, can you give this a quick read? I think that's very important right now, especially as people are really cognizant and watching their professional narrative and being careful about how they engage. And so we really see a lot of executives like doing a lot of thoughtful thinking before they post. And then on the other side of the house, like, yeah, I mean, this is, there's all kinds of really funny things about how LinkedIn is just such a sewer, basically. But I think like that's why I would say like so much of our philosophy is like being purposeful with how you're using it.
Mm.
Going back to your idea about this professional toolkit, I agree. I think there, we kind of have these like standard things, tools in our professional tool belt: mentoring, pipelining, professional development, skills training, managing teams, managing people. But personal brand or professional branding and LinkedIn really should be one of the things in your toolkit. And I think we're getting there. I think like more and more that's like an accepted idea. But I think like as you think about like, I need to find some mentors, or I really want to get certified in how to use whatever as part of your professional toolkit, really thinking about how do I use LinkedIn purposefully is critical as you think about building out that tool belt.
So you've talked a lot about how your identity and your brand can evolve kind of over time. How do you help someone stay consistent while also kind of embracing the growth that they're going through in their own personal evolution?
We really see ourselves as agents of calm, not agents of chaos. And so when we work with an executive or somebody who has like 30 years of work experience backing them up, they could probably be considered an expert on like 10 different topics. But when we work with them and we build strategy, we say, okay, on your LinkedIn, we need to identify what are the 3 to 4 buckets of topic that we're going to rotate through. And then we stick with those 3 to 4 so that when people scroll through their content, you can actually get a clear impression and an idea of who this person is, what they're about, what their expertise is. It's just so much more strategic. Mm-hmm. So if you're only working with 3 to 4 buckets of content or topics that you're promoting on LinkedIn, it's much, much, much easier to stay consistent and to stay. I mean, thought leadership is saying the same thing again and again and again and again and again. That is what thought leadership is. It is not saying one thing about 12 different topics. No, it's about understanding what your expertise is, understanding how that expertise is going to help you in your career. And it's about talking about it over and over and over and over. So that's how we stay consistent and how we help people stay on brand, so to say. And all of this lines up to their goals, basically, that we map out. If somebody's making a pivot, then we just, add in an additional bucket or an additional, we call them brand pillars. We add in an additional brand pillar. We start talking about that lightly. And over time, we just talk about it more. And then we dial down one of the other buckets, and so that it just kind of naturally looks like, oh, this is like a clear or like a really interesting, growth way that Nicole is growing and learning about something new. And I'm really enjoying the way she's talking about X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. So we really make sure that it makes sense. Like if you visit a LinkedIn page, we always say somebody goes to your content, they spend 1 to 2 minutes scrolling through your posts. They should really walk away with like a clear sense of who you are and what you're about. And the great thing about LinkedIn is like you're in control of that, So like if you do all this stuff over here and, you want to leave that in this chapter of your career and you don't want to take that with you in your next chapter of your career, then don't post about it, Post about what you want to do next or position yourself for that next opportunity. So I think it's about thinking about how are we using this to help us point in the direction that we're going in and help us really level up into those new arenas.
You work with a lot of women, if I'm not mistaken. I know Vital Voices is heavily woman focused. And so there's a lot of, I think, nuance in how women handle their own personal narratives, their ability to kind of own their power, as I think you called out in the beginning. What are some of the common patterns you see around things like confidence, voice, visibility? Where do you see some patterns emerge with women in particular?
I don't know if we see clear. I think we see more women come to us wanting our services. I don't know if that's a function of LinkedIn or just a function of like our, we're 100% referral based. So I think it might just be women referring women, which is amazing. And I honestly don't know if I see a lot of differences between how men and women show up or think about their LinkedIn. I mean, we work with male CEOs that also are like, hey, I just want to make sure that this isn't tone deaf, or I've been thinking about this. Is this a good idea? What do you think? So I think a better like qualifier, like characteristic of our clients is people who are very thoughtful and they want that partnership with a thinking partner to be like, does this make sense? Is this part of the brand strategy? They're not just like on LinkedIn reposting, doing random stuff. Like it's about the strategy and the goals. It's about like the image and the brand. And so, I think that like most professionals at the levels that we work, like are going to be really thoughtful about how they approach that public presence.
I imagine that storytelling is a pretty big part of your practice, being able to tell your story, both origin, future, that's pretty big part of the practice. Do you have kind of a methodology that you use to try and help people create their stories? I think it's tough for people to, I talk to, as I've mentioned before, a lot of, laid off federal workers, and sometimes they can't even tell their story because it's classified. So now all of a sudden you're like, how do I tell the story about the fact I've worked at the CIA and I've done amazing things, but I can't say any of those things. So what is like, talk to me about how you do that storytelling.
Yeah, we start all of our work always with what we call branding boot camp, where we talk about, like where you are in your career, what happened to help you get here? What is, when somebody visits your LinkedIn, what is that main impression you want them to get? So what's that brand purpose? And then what are the buckets of content or the brand pillars that we can talk about to help create that brand purpose? And through that, you really see coming to life a lot of that professional storytelling and talking about like, well, I was a scientist, who had this personal, I was a scientist now turned healthcare lobbyist because I had an experience with XYZ that made me understand the importance of federal advocacy in healthcare, or something like that. So I think really through setting the strategy and doing these branding workshops, which we always do at the start of our engagements, really helps set the tone. And oftentimes, like a lot of the feedback we get from the clients, and this is always very fun for us, is people say like, oh my gosh, I feel like you put on these like new glasses, like I've never looked at myself this way, or I've never seen myself in this way. And so it can really be like an amazing leveling up, I think, mentally for them, which then helps us move into the next, which is talking about their work and posting regularly on LinkedIn. A lot of what we do is, again, we bring calm to the chaos. So we take a step back and we say, you've had this incredible, amazing career. Let's be clear and succinct in what we want to be talking about. But then also, like, you're an amazing professional with all this amazing success. And like, we want that to come across. So we really see ourselves as like cheerleaders, advocates, champions for our clients. And really, I think people can feel that when they work with us, that we're really like proud of them and the work that they do. And that extra confidence helps them be more bold and more willing to put themselves out there on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we probably haven't covered the topic of confidence enough
Yeah.
because I think sometimes, a lot of our listeners are in a career transition or a career limbo, and your confidence can be really low. And
Mhm.
so to think about things like your brand voice, your brand narrative, your career story arc from a place that is already low on confidence, I think is harder. So having an outside voice help you articulate that story. I mean, I'm thinking of someone very specific right now who has an amazing, amazing story but can't see it for themselves right now because of where they are mentally, because their confidence has been shaken. They can't remember all these amazing things that they have done in their lives and the incredible hard decisions that they have made to get through there. So I think that one of the benefits of an organization like yours is having an outside in perspective and saying, I know you don't feel this right now, but we can tell you because you just told us your story that these are all the amazing things you have done. And reframing that is so, so powerful. So if that's not a big enough endorsement for your organization, Madeline, I don't know what is. All right, we are going to wrap up with my favorite thing to do, which is a little lightning round. I didn't share
Okay.
all of these with you, but some of them.
Nice.
All right, you ready? All right, she's getting comfortable. All right, finish this sentence. A strong personal brand starts with,
You.
ooh,
It's you. It's all about you. I mean, literally, I always think like everything you need for your professional brand already exists inside of you. Like it's about you. And what you should be building and projecting should communicate. It doesn't matter what table I'm in, what table I'm sitting at, what room I'm in, who I'm talking to. Like this is who I am. This is what you get. When you get me on your team or in your meeting or whatever it might be. So, yeah, a strong personal brand, it's always
what's one underrated tip for improving your LinkedIn presence?
presence. Yeah, engaging on the platform. Even if you're not willing to post, like if you can't get there, just spend time engaging, comment, and specifically commenting, and
Mhm.
that will help raise your presence.
I was talking to someone the other day and they said, "Oh, I don't really know like where to start." And I said, "You remember that old thing, that old question that we used to do right before you played something like Two Truths and a Lie, which was if you could have a table of 10 of people alive or dead at your table, who would you invite?" I'm like, "It's the same question, but just apply it to LinkedIn. Start there. Start with those
Mhm.
people that you think are kind of interesting." All right, what's the boldest thing you've ever done to own your brand?
Oh, goodness. Pitch myself for opportunities. I feel like so much of what we do is like pitching our clients and making our clients, look as best as they can online. And for years, I've always said, like, I need to be the brand for myself. Like, I need somebody to do this for me. And so, yeah, start changing the dial as the business has grown and as our team has grown to work specifically to elevate me and my presence.
Yeah.
Felt very bold and continue. I mean, I have imposter syndrome too, just like we all do, and I never want to be annoying on LinkedIn because I feel like that's a liability for my business. But at the same time, like my business is LinkedIn. So I think just squaring the circle of how do I show up with thoughtfulness and with boldness on the platform?
Yeah, it's a tough needle to thread.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. What's one small thing that someone could do this week to help them fully step into their personal brand online?
Think about your LinkedIn profile. So, not your presence, not how you're engaging or writing content, but your actual profile. Think of it as your digital handshake.
Mhm.
Spend 30 minutes looking through your LinkedIn banner, your headshot, your headline, your bio, your work experience, and make sure that when somebody meets you online for the first time, if you're going into a meeting or an event and somebody's Googling you, the LinkedIn's probably the first thing that's coming up. And so I would make sure that you feel proud of that digital handshake in the way that it looks.
Amazing. All right, Madeline, where can our listeners learn more about what you do, more about your company, and connect with you?
Yes,
I'm
thank
guessing
you.
the answer is LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. So so on LinkedIn, it's, follow me, Madeline Fetterly. We have a Be the Brand newsletter, which is amazing. We publish it monthly. It has all kinds of amazing tips, tricks, insights, comments. Our website is bethebrandcollective.com, and all of our company's social media is also bethebrandcollective.com.
Awesome.
Thank
Well,
you.
Madeline, I'm so grateful for the time that you've given our listeners today. I know how important this topic is for people, but also how triggering it can be. And I
Mm,
love your idea of owning your power, having like clarity on exactly what it is you want to say in the world. And I love the idea of a digital handshake. I hadn't heard that one before. So if our listeners are navigating change, building a platform, or just trying to figure out like how to talk about yourself online without cringing, feeling doom scrolling, this conversation gives you that permission. So, as always, thank you so much to our listeners. Madeline, amazing to see you as always. I can't wait to grab our next in-person meal together. And
yes.
thanks for everybody for listening.
Thank you, Nicole. Great to be with you guys.
Bye.